Hello, everyone. This is Kristina Mänd-Lakhiani, co-founder of Mindvalley, and welcome to Mindvalley Book Club interviews. And while we are waiting for our guests, I'll while away a few minutes by asking you to actually say hi to me in the chat if you are here. If you're joining a little later, I hope you remembered you're supposed to say hi to me in the chat. Um, and Yes, there's always a little bit of a time lag. So I always move on and then suddenly people wake up and say hi. And then it's too late to reply. Hello, Fraser. Hello. Good to see you. And good to see everyone who is going to be joining. I will introduce my guests now while you guys are joining. And then hopefully by the time we start talking about the book that we came together to discuss here, most of you will be already online. Those who are listening to us online, those who are listening to us and recording, say hi in the chat. I think it always makes a difference when people interact. So my guest today is Marina Gerner. Hi, Marina.
Hi,
So
Kristina.
I couldn't avoid pronouncing you a little bit European. I tried to sound proper. So sorry if I mispronounced your name.
No,
Uh,
no, I am pretty European, so that's perfect. I grew up in Germany and I was born in Ukraine and I lived in the US, so I'm very international in that way.
wow, I actually did think your family, your name came across German, but you were born in Ukraine. Wow.
That's right.
Um, that's interesting. Wow. So I'll give a proper introduction based on your bio, and then maybe you want to add something. So Marina is an award-winning journalist and columnist, and her work has appeared in a lot of very prominent, media, such as The Economist, Wall Street Journal, The Times, Financial Times, Wired, The Guardian. So pretty much all the big heavyweight publications. And I believe your talent, or Marina's talent, is actually in doing pretty thorough research, yet the storytelling helps you to convey very complicated topics in a very simple way for people to understand, which I also got a first-hand experience reading a book. In addition to that, despite her very youthful appearance, Marina is an adjunct professor in the NYU Stern School for Business. I hope I didn't butcher the name. You also have a PhD from the London School of Economics. And in fact, the work that went in the basis of your book, or the research that went there, actually brought you in some very noticeable grants by such foundations as Alfred Sloan Foundation and Society of Authors. Did I leave something out which is important to mention?
No, I don't think so. You've done a great job.
Thank you. And the book we're going to talk about, I hope my iPad is going to come alive, is because I have it on my iPad. Is this?
Great.
Yes. And
I
the
have a
ring light is
physical copy
reflecting.
right here, but that looks great on your iPad.
Well, because we have to read them a little faster than the snail post works. So I'm going to say it, and I have to say that I did practice a little bit. The book is called Vagina Business, and it is actually, as always, I do read the books. I would say that, although the book does talk about female health, broadly speaking, and it has a very strong feminist message, which both I loved very much. But it is, in essence, a business book, because as I was reading, I couldn't help saying that this is such a wonderful way to learn about business, because you actually do completely explain the process of startups, of finding venture funding, and the process which is not taught usually in that context. But I think, considering that the industry that you're talking about is a very complex industry for a lot of reasons, I found this book as much a business textbook as it is, of course, a book that deals with a lot of social issues that our society has. Now, if you guys who are joining us haven't read the book, we're going to share the link. If I have my Masha here with me, I'm not sure, she had to go attend to her sick horse. Do share the link in the comments, but if not, we'll share the link in the description to the video for sure. Get the book, because it's really one of the better books that one of the best books that I've read this year. So thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. And I guess the very warming up question is, how did you end up with this topic? Because according to yourself, you've written about everything, about a lot of different topics. Why vagina business?
Yeah, I will tell you, but actually, I loved what you said before, so I want to comment on that very briefly about how it is a business book, because that's exactly what it is. When I was writing the book, I was thinking this is, primarily a business book, and I really wanted to explain how a startup gets created and how it can succeed using examples that are not typically used in the business world, because it's all about women's health and how you can innovate in women's health. And I was in New York last week. I was talking to Cindy Gallup, and she said to me, this book is actually the perfect book for business students or students who are about to graduate. And I thought that was such a good assessment, it's a careers book in some ways for people who are about to go into the world of work, um, to understand business. Because yeah, the reason I wanted to say that because not many people put it in those words. So I really appreciate that you did. But let me tell you how I got into it. So it began about 5 years ago with a bra. I was at a conference which was organized by MIT and King's College in London, where I'm based. I'm based in London. And I learned something new, which is something many people still don't know about. It's that if I ask you to imagine a person who's having a heart attack, who do you see?
Mhm.
Everyone on Zoom. Imagine the person.
Yeah, I would like people to actually think about it in your head, because I have to confess to you, Marina, that you quoted one of the prominent feminist scholars. So in the beginning of the book, so we've read some of the same books, and I think I know the answer to this question.
Yes, yes, you do. And perhaps some others know as well. But the answer is that most of us think of an old man. That's what we tend to see in movies. And, when we think about the symptoms that
It's
he's experiencing, exactly, it's pressure on the chest, exactly, and pain on the left, just like you showed it. But those symptoms are typical for men, they're not typical for women. Women are much more likely to have long term extreme fatigue or jaw pain, for example. But we know a lot less about how to spot heart health issues in women, unfortunately, because our medical research has been based on the male body, on the male default. And so as a result, women are 50% more likely than men to be given the wrong diagnosis after having a heart attack, which I think is just, shocking, because heart attacks are the number one killer of men and women in the US and in the UK. And so when I came across a company called Bloomer Tech, I thought what they created was really cool. It's a smart bra that uses ECG technology and that helps women who are at risk monitor their heart health. And because it's a bra, it can also be used in clinical trials remotely. And so that way, hopefully, it will become easier to enroll women in those kinds of trials. And what I liked about learning about this bra is that, I learned about a problem, but I also saw there are people who are working on a solution. And I'm
Mhm.
always very inspired by solutions. And so I saw the founder, she's called Alicia Chong Rodriguez, at a conference, as I said, and I ran towards her to ask for her business card because I really wanted to write about her. I thought the world needs to know about what she's doing and how she's doing it. She gave me her business card, and then I pitched the story to some of the publications that you mentioned in your introduction that I typically write for, where I have editors who usually say yes because they like what I do and they know me. We've worked together for a long time, but unfortunately, nobody was interested, and there was just tumbleweeds in my inbox. And somebody said, "Oh, a smart bra, for what?" And there was a sense that this idea was a bit niche, which
Mhm.
is mind blowing, given that, yes, exactly. Heart health for women, we're only over 50% of the population. So,
Can I ask you guys who are live, can you say if you know anyone who's wearing a bra in your life?
yeah, that's a great question. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, there was a sense at the time that it was niche. And this was before COVID. I think during COVID, a few things changed. And one of them was that initially, I don't know if you remember this, but initially men had worse symptoms from COVID than women.
Mm,
Nowadays, women are more likely to have long term COVID, but initially, men were more affected. And I think if you wanted to be cynical, you could say, people started to pay attention to the sex differences in health because men were initially more affected. And then a book called Invisible Women came out that has also really helped to create more awareness around gender data gaps. And I managed to publish the story about the smart bra
mm.
in The Guardian. And the story came out, and I was asked to chair a panel at a FemTech conference, probably the first ever FemTech conference. FemTech stands for female technology. So that's technology focused on female bodies. And my panel was in the morning, and I just ended up staying for the whole day
Mm,
because I wanted to listen to all of the other panels. I was so drawn into this topic and fascinated by it because I realized, you think you know your own body, but there's so much more to learn.
mm,
And I was learning a lot about my own body, even though I was there to learn about technology and innovation and so on, right? But I was learning about both of those things. So
mm.
the smart bra is the first out of two origin stories that I have.
It's actually really really inspiring because as I was reading the book, I realized that femtech is really that industry which is interesting, at least for 50% of the population, I suppose, because and you mentioned it, I think, a few times that in the process you learn about your body. As an amateur investor, because I started taking care of my own finances when I divorced, natural, I guess.
Yeah.
uh, I also grew up in a gender-biased society, and here I mean gender, not sex. So uh, it's really curious, and your book starts with actually exploring females or women in business, uh, and pointing out that first of all, it's not a new phenomenon. Women have been in business, women have been investors, and in addition to that, there's numbers that showing that women are doing better in business.
Mhm.
Yet it's really hard to break through. And with that said, most of the women are not even in femtech. A lot of them are doing business in masculine, more masculine uh, territory. So could you maybe describe that part? I know it's not about female body yet, but what are the hurdles that women in business have to face when they're trying to start something currently in the 21st century?
Yes, absolutely. There are several hurdles. Funding is the biggest one, especially when we look at the tech world and venture capital, because right now female founders still only get something like 2% of overall venture capital. And this problem is even more pronounced in femtech because the industry is characterized by stigma and taboos. So, this is why I also have vagina in the title of my book, because I wanted to try and sort of destigmatize, normalize the word a little bit, um, because part of what got me into this field as well was another device I came across that was vagina centric, called Materna.
Mhm.
Materna Medical is the company. So when I started doing the research and when I came across the bra, I was in my early 30s and I knew that I wanted to have children soon. And I also knew that 9 in 10 first time mothers experience birth injury. And that's something that I think friends will sometimes tell you about, or, women talk about this in hushed voices, like, oh, this can happen. Or there's another school of thought of women who say, don't tell her anything. You don't want to put her off, you don't want to scare her. Whereas I've always liked knowing about things. I think knowledge is power. So I knew about this fact, and, you know, I was considering my options. So I was really excited to come across this company in California that's creating a preventative device that could potentially help us with birth injuries. It's a dilator, and it pre-stretches the vaginal canal in the first stage of labor. And so it stretches those muscles that by the time the baby comes through, hopefully they're pre-stretched and less likely to tear. And they're hoping to make birth easier, faster, and to hopefully prevent pelvic organ prolapse later down the line as well. They're not, I should say, they're not on the market yet. They're in clinical trials. So we don't know whether they will make it to the market, but I was really intrigued by the idea because I thought, okay, this is a really cool um, potential device. And when I was researching the space, I spoke to the CEO. She's called Tracy McNeil, and she told me that the last big innovation in the standard of care was the epidural, which was
Mm.
popularized in the 1950s. And that just blew my mind completely because if you're about to give birth tomorrow and you go to the hospital, whether that's in Europe or in the US, um, you'll be offered the epidural as a great option um, in terms of pain relief. And there's no other area of society or technology where we say, look at this cutting edge device that was
From
popular in the
1950s.
1950s. This is the best we have. Look at this incredible floppy disk, look at this incredible, I don't know, horse-drawn carriage. It just doesn't happen. And the forceps, for example,
Mm.
which is basically a set of salad forks, that's from the 17th century. Um, so these devices need an update.
That
And
I must tell that that part of the book was so shocking to me. I've cut it into quotes.
it was shocking to me too, and it inspired me to, keep looking into this and keep digging into it. And so I spoke to other founders in the space, I would say the vagina centric space. So everything around menopause and fertility. Um, and of course, not all symptoms of menopause are vagina centric, but that's what
Yeah.
I was looking at the time. And I learned that it's really hard to raise money in this space because investors are embarrassed. And I have this quote from one VC investor who says, I don't want to talk about vaginas in my Monday morning partner meeting. Right. So a bunch of guys doesn't want to talk about vaginas in front of other guys. That is one of the main hurdles. And I was really angry to learn that that is one of the reasons for why we don't get the innovation that we clearly need and deserve. So I wrote this article called We Need to Talk About Investors' Problem with Vaginas. And the article went viral. That was in Wired magazine. And so when that article hit a nerve, for me, that was because a book is also, you also have to make a business case for it.
Mhm.
So that allowed me to say, okay, there's a really strong interest in this topic, and I'm going to write a book about it. And so
I'm
here I am, just a short writing session later. No, I'm kidding. It took many years, not a short writing session.
Well, and I'm really happy that you wrote the book. I had wonderful few days reading it, and I strongly recommend that you guys also pick it up and dive deeper. The question I wanted to ask you as I was reading the book was, you bring a lot of cases of femtech. I didn't even know a lot of things existed, and probably partially because we all suffer from the same how to say the effects of taboo of the conversation about those topics. So we just don't discuss whether it's menopause or menstruation or anything female related. But what I noticed is that a lot of cases that you brought up I've never heard about, and the few cases that I have heard about were the scandalous cases, the ones which were actually ended up in a huge for example, litigation or some money being paid to customers. So how come these cases actually do surface and the good examples are not out there? You really have to go and look for them. You do not normally hear about femtech wonder stories anywhere. In fact, your book is pretty much the first thing where I've come across that.
Great. I'm glad you say that because that was the intention. I was asking myself the same question, why isn't there a place where we read about these success stories? And even when Materna Medical, I think they raised $20 million at one point. You know, it wasn't covered somewhere major, if I remember correctly. I followed some of these fundraisers, and oftentimes I thought, why isn't this in TechCrunch? Why isn't this,
Mm.
somewhere big that covers uh, startups raising money? But I think, unfortunately, the taboo is very strong, and there are so many decision makers on the way to something getting covered that if just one person gets embarrassed on the way, that's enough to kill a story. That's enough to say, oh, we don't cover this kind of thing, or our readers will not want to read about periods, or whatever it may be. And
Mhm.
I certainly had to convince many people in the publishing world as well to keep vagina in the title of the book, for example. So that was a conscious decision. And um, when we first sold the book, we approached, my agent and we approached multiple publishing houses, and many people were interested, and many people were saying to me, this is a great idea, great stories, but are you sure about the title?
Mm.
And so I kept saying, yeah, I think it's a good title. I think it works because, it has multiple meanings, the vagina business, like, what's all this business about vaginas, and also the literal sense of the vagina business, the uh, birth dilator, for example. But also it stands out, it catches your eye, and so I kept making the case. And then once we found a publisher, I was asked to come up with 16 alternative titles at one point. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, the pushback is huge. Because
Yeah.
I think it's a perfect title and it's a perfect visual. I really love the visual, especially in light of the quotes that you have in the book that penises are decorating the walls of public bathrooms around the world, yet majority of us don't know how to draw a clitoris. And by the way, I am using these words quite bravely because they are medical terms. It's not a swear word.
Yeah.
I agree with you. It's sad that we can't talk about that, that the female body is being censored. And you do mention that until now, it's easier to advertise. Uh, uh, and we could talk about why there's so much sex talk when we talk about female health, but it's easier to advertise products which are targeting men compared to
Oh yeah.
women.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of censorship of anything aimed at women's health, both in mainstream media and on social media, unfortunately. So even with the events that I do, I'm sometimes told that the banner or the flyer was censored on LinkedIn. Um, but with femtech companies, pretty much all of them have experienced social media censorship through Meta. So if they post something on Instagram or Facebook, they'll be told your ad has been blocked, and then the explanation that is given varies from it's too political, for instance, or it's uh, too adult. That's my understanding. And so they use euphemisms. Oftentimes, you will see women's health companies using images of oranges, for example, or they will say, "This is for your V," and then you think, "Okay, what's the V? Isn't V for Vendetta? V like Voldemort? What is it that we're talking about?" Um,
But
so that
it
still
is
happens.
it is an underlying problem in femtech, yes, the fact
Yeah,
that we can't even talk freely about it or advertise for that matter.
exactly. Yeah. It's hard to fundraise, and then it's hard to get the word out because of the censorship that is happening. So, yeah, so what happened with my title is we came up with 16 alternatives. One of them was, for example, When Women Are Well. It'll be a very different book. And I'm not sure it would galvanize people in the same way, because the advantage of a title like this is that there are many people who really love the fact that vagina is in the title and who will, send me pictures of themselves reading the book proudly on the train, for instance, saying, "Ah, everybody was giving me stares, everybody was looking at me." So people are very energized by it as well. And so my publisher, my publishing house, they took those 16 titles and they tested them on our target
Mm.
audience. And guess which title won?
Oh, I'm glad it did.
Yeah, it did. And that was just such great proof for us to say, okay, the target audience really likes this title and it does speak to people in a certain way in which when women are well wouldn't have done, right?
Mm. So my side glance does register that there's a little bit of communication happening in the chat. If you have a question to my guest, please leave it in Q&A because then I can pick it up because my eyesight is not terribly good. So I generally try to keep the question to the guest in the Q&A. But if you don't have questions, it's fine as well because I am the one who's read the book and I have a lot of questions. Maybe I should have started with a more like foundational question about what is femtech, because I started this conversation as if everybody understands what is femtech. Another nuance that I want you to cover, if possible, is that you do mention that not everything which has to do with female sex or even health is necessarily femtech, because there are also companies which capitalize on our insecurities, for example, or well, are not strictly speaking femtech. So could you maybe give the definition? A little late, but still better.
Yes, absolutely. So when you use the term femtech, a lot of people, it's just something to know, hear it as fintech, financial tech. So that's something that happens. Also, if you use the term femtech, there's a good proportion of people who think it means companies that are led by women, which
Mm.
again is not what it is, even though something like 80% of femtech companies are led by women. And that's very unusual in the tech industry overall. So, femtech stands for female technology, and it's a term that was coined by Ida Tin. She's the founder of the period app Clue. She coined it in 2016 to create an umbrella term to bring all of these different companies together that were focusing on the female body. And so the way I define it is femtech focuses on female bodies. It's often consumer focused and digitally enabled. And it focuses on everything from periods to menopause. Um, but it's important to remember that women's health is not just about our reproductive health. It encompasses things like heart health, which we spoke about, or bone health, for example. And the way I define femtech is also in a, I guess, in a value impact driven way. I think it has to be technology that helps us move women's health forward and technology that makes a positive impact, positive contribution to women's health. Whereas, unfortunately, I have seen people use the term femtech for all sorts of things, including hair removal devices and weight loss things and beauty products, which I've got nothing against lipstick, but that's a different category. It doesn't really move our health or our understanding of women's health forward. So the way I define it is in a positive way. Not everyone uses the term in that way. I've seen people use femtech for for leggings even, or for breast enlargement. So there's
Mm.
uh, yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that.
Like implants.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Mm.
Which, yeah, it's just absurd. And I have a whole chapter in the book, which is about how companies try and monetize our insecurities. And so I distinguish between femtech and scam tech. And
Mhm.
scam tech is stuff that is basically not evidence based, and it feeds on people's fears and anxieties. And
Mhm.
that includes, vagina steaming devices, for example, or um, fertility supplements that are just sugar pills.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, there's a lot of that.
It's a very interesting discussion, and I think part of the reason why this scam tech is even possible is because we don't even know our own bodies. As I was reading the book, I was a little terrified and a tiny bit embarrassed that in my mature age of 46, some things I didn't know. I've had two children, and we take things for granted. So, from your point of view, I know you're a financial journalist, or at least you started from there. What do you think is going to advance this industry faster? The fact that female founders actually do tend to be better at returning on investment and actual success, or do you think we still need the society to also loosen up about some of the taboos and actually stop applying double standards towards discussing male body and female body?
All of the above. We also need more research on women's health. That's one of the other obstacles, is that women have long been excluded from clinical trials. And so we are now trying to fill the gaps that were previously created. And so, from a business perspective, that's a problem because businesses will often take something that has already been researched in the academic world, and then they'll commercialize it, or they'll create something that can then be commercialized out of that. But if the research hasn't been done on an academic level, then it sometimes falls to companies to do that research, and that puts us in a weird place.
Mhm.
It puts the companies in a weird place because they have to have the funding for it, and VC investors do not typically fund, foundational research. Some of them do, but not typically. And I think for consumers, it's also a little bit odd because we have to trust that companies will do the research um, using, rigorous academic metrics. So
Mhm.
the fact that the research is still missing is a problem. And then the way I see it is there is a gap that has opened up in our healthcare system where women are unfortunately often ignored or gaslit. We're told, oh, you have a painful period, that's normal. Painful IUD insertion, that's normal. Pain with breastfeeding, oh, just wait, it will pass. Where female pain is not taken seriously, or it's normalized. But in reality, it shouldn't be normal, right? Just because it's normalized, that doesn't mean it should be normal. And so we have this gap between our experience or our expectations as patients and what the healthcare system often uh, provides. And so the question is, who is stepping into that gap? And
Mhm.
oftentimes it's good actors like femtech companies, because the founders of femtech companies are often medical professionals themselves or patients themselves. So they've seen an unmet need and they've decided, I'm going to create something, or I'm going to use my research to create something that will help other women like me who are experiencing what I've experienced. Maybe they found a solution, or maybe they've created something for themselves, or they've done some kind of research that has helped themselves, and now they're turning it into a business, or they're trying to bring it to other people. Uh,
Mhm.
but you also have bad actors stepping into that gap because there are companies that recognize, okay, women are told their pain is normal, but if I sell a sugar pill and I say, hey, this will help your period cramps or whatever, um, then that can get sold. And I think in some ways it's interesting that businesses are taking these issues seriously, whether they're good actors or bad actors. They notice there's an opportunity there, um,
Mhm.
when in reality it's the healthcare system that should be addressing many of
Mm.
these issues. And in an ideal scenario, femtech companies will become part of the healthcare system, and they will be covered by insurance and so on. They will become part of the standard of care, ideally.
So, if bad actors also use the same rhetoric as the good actors, and because marketers are pretty good at figuring out the pain points and talking to the pain points,
Yeah.
and there is not enough information or research or even comparative research, because I was thinking about some period products to shift to another type, and the one which I thought about, I read your book and I suddenly realized that this is the only one I knew. There are apparently others, and and they're not all the same. So how do regular people who are not researching, regular women or people who have the female body or female body characteristics, how do we go about that? Where do we find our information? How do we even find out what's possible? Because when I was delivering a baby, all I knew is that it's going to be painful, because that's what everybody says.
Yeah. Well, what can I say? Start by reading the book. There's a lot of information in here, and I've learned a huge amount um, by writing this book. And I feel it has really empowered me in my approach to my healthcare. So I wrote the book, and I had a baby. I was, planning those things to more or less happen at the same time. So I used all of the research for my own experience of birth, and I did have a good experience, which I realize is unusual. Um, but I think the more you know, the more you can ask questions and advocate for yourself and know all the different options, because it's not like we're typically told all of those options, and it depends on which medical professional you meet or which midwife you meet. Whereas if you know, okay, these are my potential options, you'll know what to ask. Um, and I think right now that unfortunately is still something women have to do.
Mhm. So I believe that feminism is not just for women. What is there? Is there anything men, and I hope some of the men are in Mindvalley audience are also listening to that. Is there anything that men could change to actually help us move towards a little more equal society, at least when it comes to health?
Yeah, absolutely. I think men need to know about these things as well and have the language for it and be informed, to support families, employees, because women's health is never just confined to women, right? When women are well, the whole family is well, and the workplace is, and the neighborhood is, and the whole nation is. So I think women's health is called women's health, but in reality, it affects everybody. And I have several men in the book who have created really interesting things. There is, for example, who could I talk about? Just trying to decide. There is a young man called Kevin Eisenfratz, who's the CEO of Contraline, and he's creating a contraceptive for men, a
Mm.
non-hormonal, it's a reversible vasectomy. And that's not femtech, technically, but I have included him because I think that for contraception to be a more equitable affair, we need more options for men as well. Right now in the US, for instance, 3/4 of couples rely on the woman for long-term contraception.
Mm.
So that's not a very equitable affair. But if we come up with new forms of contraceptives that men and young men especially are happy to use, I think that will improve the lives of women as well.
Mm.
So his
I
story
think
is really fascinating.
I think this is such a deep question, though, because it starts at that early age, not early age, at that early step of the process. If contraception, if it's not just a burden on women, but if men share the responsibility for planning whether they want to have a child or not, I think it carries on to later understanding that the child is not just a woman's business and just woman's responsibility. So when I read this part, I was actually quite well, it was a moment for me to realize that it starts so early on that the contraception is the problem of a woman. It's on her shoulders pretty much to take care of not getting pregnant.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be, because it does take two people, right? And as you
So
say, the child is not just the woman. So on the policy level, obviously we need good shared parental leave. And if shared parental leave was normalized, society would look quite different too.
Well, here I think the battle is quite different for Americans and for Europeans because you are European and but you are a lot in US. I think for US the battle is even harder because they're the at least that part of life when you have children. When I read the practices there, I'm horrified and I can't imagine having children when you have to go back to work and then yeah. Pay for everything yourself and but we don't have a lot of time to actually dig deeper. For those of you who are interested, I strongly recommend the book for many reasons. If you're a woman, you will learn a lot about your body. Surprise, surprise. I'm talking about that as a person who's 46, not very shy to ask or to demand. But still, I was like, where were you before? But
Oh,
as
thank
uh,
you.
as an amateur investor, I say it's also an amazing book for you if you are interested in that aspect, as in investing, well, as a venture capitalist or startup. A founder of a startup, it has a lot of business lessons as well. And if you're a feminist, I'm an amateur feminist as well. You see, your book ticks all my boxes. Then you will find it also very inspiring because it has a very wonderful. I suppose it's the feminist manifesto at the very end in the last chapter. And I hope my daughter will get to see that world. But what I want to ask before we start finishing, and I promise we'll finish now, is you came to FemTech also a little later, and I'm sure you must have had also moments where it was a little hard to start a conversation about vagina, for example, or pick up a condom in a in a drugstore. So, are there any advice you can give people who are still who kind of mentally understand it's important, but still it is hard to start a conversation with your man or with your children about, I'm having a period right now or going and getting that period product. Is there anything you can suggest for people who understand, but their shyness or their natural maybe tendency are still not there to just say out loud, vagina, not in hushed tones?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think sometimes the first step is the hardest in this case, and once you've said the word vagina the first time in a particular conversation, then saying it the second time is much easier. That's something I realized with my students. So I teach business students, and I come in to meet a new group, and I tell them about my work. And initially people giggle, but only for a few seconds, and then they get really comfortable with it. So I think it actually doesn't take very long to get comfortable. Um, but also, I've had people say to me, "Look, I love your book, but I was sitting at the dentist and I took off the cover."
Mm,
You're welcome to do that. If that's what helps you feel comfortable, I won't get offended. Maybe there are more steps you need to take first to get to that point, and that's okay. But some of the most powerful feedback I've received from people is when they've said, I've read your book and it has helped me talk to my young daughter, or I had a conversation with my mother for the first time where we didn't use euphemisms. And I think that's just so it's so powerful. But
mm.
it won't be the same for everyone. So, whatever makes you feel like you can get there, and it
Mm.
doesn't have to be on every front as well. So maybe you're happy to say vagina, but you're not so happy uh, openly giving somebody a period product, for example. So do whatever you can, I would say. It is very personal after all. But
Uh, if you don't mind, there's one question, and
yeah,
I know I promised to let you go
yeah, yeah.
on because
What
Marina
about
and 9 months.
endometriosis?
Sorry?
The what
Yes.
about?
No, actually, there was in Q&A because I don't check the chat that well. But in Q&A, there's a question from Christophe Duval. Is there by any chance a replay available of this book club? Well, that's a question to me. Yes, we are going to post it all for you guys to listen afterwards. Again, we first, of course, need to clean up a little bit the video because when you're watching it in replay, some parts might be not so interesting. But endometriosis, if you saw the question, please do. Yeah.
Yes, I just saw somebody commented in the chat saying that there is lack of awareness and too many women suffer from this. Absolutely, it's estimated to be 1 in 10 women. And I have several stories, just wanted to say several stories about endometriosis and innovation in that space in the book as well, because I think that's a hugely important topic.
So yeah, it's a very interesting book. It is very easy read because Marina is very good at telling the stories, and it's inspirational. So I warmly recommend it to you. And unfortunately, we have to finish. So I will do the usual request of people who are online to leave a heart for my guests in the chat. If you're watching it in recording, and there will be a recording, leave a heart in the comments below. But for Marina, I want to ask my favorite question. How would you like, or what do you think? How do you want your book to change the world?
Yes, great question. I want to change the way people think and talk about female bodies. And I want to inspire more people into the femtech space, more investors, more researchers, more entrepreneurs, so that we see a completely new world of women's health for all of us.
And for us investors, it's also going to be so wonderful to finally invest something that matters and actually has really huge chances of succeeding massively. So as an investor, I was very curious to see, are there any venture funds which invest specifically in femtech? And I'm planning to go and research if we have any femtech in Estonia. So if you know any contacts, please let me know. And thank you so much for your book. Thank you so much for your wonderful energy and for coming and joining us and for this conversation. I had a huge pleasure. I hope that this conversation continues and maybe we'll see each other again. And thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you and bye-bye. See you soon again.
Take care, everyone.